Hello and welcome to Hindsight, our history through stories. Here on RN, I'm Lorena Allen. Today, a tale about freedom and justice, fact and fiction, which takes us all the way from Ireland to a small town in the northeast of Canada. Hidden away in the archives at the University of Newfoundland is this unusual recording from the early 1960s.
Well, General Tudor, I'm delighted to have the opportunity of coming in this afternoon and having such a nice cup of tea with you. Have you known Sir Winston Churchill long?
Well, I've known him for a good many years. We first met at Bangalore, India, where we were both stationed.
What was Sir Winston like as a young man?
He was very fresh-looking, nice-looking young man with reddish hair.
It's an interview with a 92-year-old retired British general, then living in that part of Canada. And it's unusual for two reasons. Firstly, because it's the only interview that the general ever gave. And secondly, because while the interviewer asks plenty of questions about his friendship with Winston Churchill, she never once asks about the more unsavoury events of his life, events for which he was once infamous and which made him the most hated man in Ireland, and which compelled two men to cross the Atlantic to assassinate him. At least, that's how the story goes. His name was Major General Hugh Tudor, and his story, depending on who's telling it, is either historical fact.
My father's generation would not have taken that lightly. He really was. He would have been the incarnation of evil.
Or it's speculation.
If it didn't happen, it should have. Which is probably why the story goes around.
Or even complete crime thriller fiction.
Well, fiction is often truer than fact. Because we can control all the variables.
At first, Stride didn't think, or want to think, that the sounds he heard were gunshots. Circular Road was a quiet, tree-lined street, Government House and the Colonial Building, nominal seat of the Newfoundland government, not far away. Gunshots were out of place in this neighborhood, but Detective Inspector Eric Stride had heard a lot of gunfire in his lifetime.
I'm Tom Curran, and I'm the author of the Inspector Stride mystery series set in Newfoundland, post-war, 1947.
He put in a quick call to Constabulary headquarters at Fort Townsend and then retrieved the Colt revolver from his bedroom. He threw on a raincoat and ran downstairs, heading for Bannerman Park.
The idea of the book, well, it was an obituary for Hugh Tudor, a gentleman of whom I had not really heard. Read the obituary and thought, God, this is all very interesting. There's all this rich history. And so I took all this and started to write a novel which involved a retired British Army officer who came to Newfoundland, and I took it from there.
When he reached the sidewalk, he made a quick survey of the street, but his main focus was directed towards the park. He set off on a fast trot in that direction, angling over to the south side of the street, his Colt in his right hand, all the time on his guard, in case someone with a gun should suddenly appear.
Eric Stride, Inspector Eric Stride, well, he's obviously a figment of my sometimes fevered imagination. He's an inspector with the Newfoundland Constabulary, and he owns a house on Circular Road. And as it turns out, that's also the street where General Tudor lived, at number 22 Circular Road. So Stride is there. He hears the gunshots and runs out of his house to investigate.
He reached the eastern end of the park in less than a minute, came to a halt, and looked around. Then he began moving ahead again, slowly, scanning the area, straining to see through the dark and the rain.
I tried to be as historically accurate as I could be in the little I knew about Tudor's background, and Tudor remained something of a shadowy character.
Minutes later, Stride came upon the body of a man lying on the ground. The man was lying on his back, but tilted to the left, his right arm draped across his torso. Stride turned the man's head and saw on the left side the small entrance wound of a bullet, so neatly circumscribed that it seemed impossible that it could have produced a large amount of blood that ran down over his chin and over his clothing. The rain continued to fall.
Hello. How are you? Come right in. I couldn't find all that much, but
In St. John's today, hardly anyone who knew him is still around.
I'm just going to show you. I think I have a picture of him. Yes, there he is. That's where he lived. You know, was Major Bar on Circular Road. Yes, he was out there for a while. He lived there with my great aunts for a little while, and then he moved out to Churchill Park, and that's really was his last place. He was a very handsome man when you come to look at him.
This is his book.
Yes, that was written by him, The Fog of War.
Oh, it's inscribed. It's inscribed to you.
That's right, yeah.
To Carla with love from Hugh, too.
That's right. They'll say he knew me from a little thing, you know. But I had to do some of the arranging about, you know, when he died. They phoned me to tell me that he'd gone, and so I had to arrange. But he got all his funeral and everything paid for. All I had to do was phone Oaks. I don't know if you remember Oaks Funeral Home. Well, that's where he was waked. And this was his funeral. He had a real sort of military funeral. That was down, of course, in the Anglican Cemetery. He was very much, very aristocratic, actually, and very, very straight and very correct. But,
And what are these?
oh, that's the knuckle dusters. Well, he had those because there was a price on his head. He never knew when he was going to be attacked. And so he sort of wore those under his gloves. Brass knuckles, yeah. Put your fingers through them and just clasp the way, hold it there with your hand. And as far as I know, that's the way you hold them. I don't know if the thumb goes through here. I don't think so. The knuckles here, you see, would go right on your clasp it in your hand and give someone a good punch with them. If I were to get you here, you know, you'd know all about it. If I did it any harder, I'd go through the table. So he used to walk around with that, you see, so if anyone attacked him, he would be able to use them. He never wore them when I was around, so he couldn't have been afraid of me.
Butcher continued his probing of the body. Stride focused a flashlight beam to assist him. And after a few minutes, the doctor stood up and took out his cigarette case and lighted it. 3 wounds, Butcher said.
3 wounds. 2 in the chest, plus the head wound. I think any of the 3 might have been enough to kill him. The head wound, certainly. Well, I didn't know him personally, but I do know who he is. He's English, but I think he's lived here for a long time. Someone told me he had a military background. British Army, I think, but don't quote me on that.
Stride borrowed another cigarette.
What do you think of it, Thomas? I've never seen anything like this before, not in St. John's.
A man takes 3 well-directed bullets from a semi-automatic in the middle of a public park with a fatal shot looking like a coup de grace. No, I haven't seen anything like this before either. I know it's odd, given the hour and the weather, but I wonder if he was meeting someone here this evening.
Like the man who shot him.
Or a woman. Or perhaps he was in the habit of taking walks late at night, rain or no rain, and someone had paid attention.
And was waiting for him when he walked through the park.
That would seem to be one possibility.
Stride watched as Butcher made his way back across the park in the direction of Circular Road. He took a long, final drag on his cigarette and then pinched off the end and placed the butt in the pocket of his oilskin. This was a crime scene, after all.
My name is Michael Boyle, and I'm originally from County Derry in Northern Ireland, and I settled in St. John's. Now, back to your question, why did you come to Newfoundland? For my research, Tudor had a fine military record in World War One, and that's how he came in contact with folks in the Newfoundland Regiment. He was commander of the Newfoundland Regiment, I think, from about 1917, so he obviously got to know the Newfoundlanders, and of course that leads to the question, when he came to Newfoundland, what was the relationship of the regiment to setting him up here, and was there protection from him? And I think probably there was sometime initially, early on in the early days.
Was he keeping his head down?
Yes, I think he was keeping his head down. He didn't sign any documents. He didn't, for example, at the Officers' Club at Crow's Nest, he never signed his name there. There are very, very few photographs. But at the same time, he didn't change his name. But he had a very, very quiet life. And of course, I mean, I've heard stories that Tudor had a knuckle duster when he was walking downtown St. John's. And he also, I was able to trace here that he had a permit here for a Wilkinson Webley .55. Yes, application to register firearm, and it's re Sir Hugh Tudor, KCB, CB, CMG, and it's a description of the firearm, and it's a Wilkinson Webley, Class B. It's a caliber .455, and has a serial number 128074. And it can, number of shots is 6, the length is 6 inches, and the occupation of the applicant as Major General, British Army retired, and the purpose of the firearm required self-defense.
Stride shook the water off the umbrella, furled it, and opened his front door. A woman was sitting on the steps near the door of his flat.
You should lock your downstairs door, Inspector. You can never tell who might come calling.
I take your point.
Stride hadn't seen Rita Fleming since the Taylor case in the spring. He unlocked his door and stood to the side so she could come in.
I know the man who was killed.
How? We haven't released the name yet.
He was one of my clients. We got together a couple of times a month. We ended up having a kind of a friendship.
How much did you know about him? You did know he was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Did he talk about that?
Not very much. I think it was something that bothered him.
Did he say why?
No, but he had bad memories. And sometimes he didn't sleep well.
She caught his expression.
I don't often sleep with clients. He was an exception. He often had nightmares. Sometimes he would wake me up with his shouting.
And he never said what it was about.
He said it had to do with the war. But that's all he would say. Do you have a cigarette? I left mine at home, and I really need one right now.
He gave her one and held out his lighter.
There is one other thing. I almost forgot. Does the name Crozier mean anything to you?
Crozier. I've heard the name before, but it doesn't mean anything special. Someone he knew?
It's one of those names he said once or twice, on a couple of those nights when he couldn't sleep. I remembered it because I'd never heard it before, or since, for that matter.
And it was just the name he said? Nothing else?
I asked him once who this Crozier was, but all he would say was that it was someone he'd served with once. I think I should be on my way.
Stride took her coat from the closet and helped her on with it. She picked up her umbrella, opened the door, and stepped out onto the landing.
And if I think of anything else, I'll be in touch, Eric.
Stride watched as she went carefully down the stairs, her high heels clacking on the linoleum. When she got to the bottom, she pulled the door open, turned, and waved. Through the open door, he could see that it was raining. Again. On the other side of the Atlantic, Hugh Tudor is remembered too. Every April, in the churchyard at Scariff, near Fingal, near Killaloe, East Clare, in the west of Ireland.
Good morning to everyone, and you're all very welcome to our annual commemoration, in memory of the Scariff martyrs, and we're delighted to be here again to remember our past. This is the 90th anniversary of our Scariff martyrs, and in honour of those members, our four great martyrs, Michael Brud McMahon, Alfie Rogers, Martin Gilday and Michael Egan, we're going to say a decade of the Rosary in memory of those four brave martyrs. The Father, of the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
What are some of the other things that stand out in your memory about Sir Winston, General Tudor? When did you meet him?
Well, I met him later, of course, in the European War. On one occasion, had arranged for what we call the strafe of a certain strong point in the German lines. And I decided to go down the front trench. And I told Winston, and he said he'd like to come too, and I'd warned him that we'd probably get a certain amount of shelling. We had rather a warm time. Our big howitzer landed 2 shells on the parapet where we were, a few feet away. We moved along the trench, and I went hurriedly to warn the battery to lengthen their range. But afterwards, his response was rather characteristic. He wrote a longish letter about it. Give me that letter. My dear Hugh, thank you so much for your letter. It was, in fact, the only specimen of representing frontline bombardment that I had the chance to see. I don't think I should have enjoyed it if it had gone on for 8 hours instead of 1. However, it stopped with agreeable punctuality.
Very impressive.
Is that recorded now?
Let perpetual light shine upon him, let the rest in peace.
Okay, I'm going to stop this
As we
in part
gather here
2.
to commemorate
In the part 1, I mean.
memories
Part 2
of the
about to
people
commence.
of East Clare, Old